Hi, this is Matt Philleo with Fine Art by Matt Philleo, doing another weekly painting art tip session with you. Here to show you the acrylic glazing technique. Last time I was working on a different portrait of my wife and my daughter, but today I want to work on a commissioned portrait of a dog. And this is an 8x10. It's on masonite panel or hardboard panel. So it's a little different surface than your canvas. The texture is a little smoother, which will then allow me to get a lot of the details you see within here. If you look at this original photo, and this is a nice photo, it actually captures a lot of detail. You can see the dog is sitting on a car seat, of course, and the light's just coming in through the window and capturing the whiskers and all the different textures of the fur, and then also even the reflection in the eyes is just beautiful. It's a nice blue light coming in through the window. So this is going to be a really awesome portrait. I'm looking forward to it, and it all starts with having an excellent photo to work from, which the client supplied me. And always appreciative when I get a good clear photo with nice lighting, not flash photography lighting, and then a lot of detail showing. So anyway, looking forward to doing this portrait and showing you the stages as we go along. So I start with a sketch. I used a kind of a terracotta sepia tone colored pencil, which allowed me to get a lot of detail, and it also keeps it within the color scheme of the dog as well. Obviously you can see the colors there, the yellows and the oranges and the browns, and how that's going to work then with the foundation sketch that I put down. I sealed that in with clear glazing medium. It's matte medium, flat finish, clear acrylic without the pigment. And I use that for glazing and also for sealing in the sketch, so that when I start to paint on the surface, I don't have my details obliterated by my brush strokes. So this is all sealed in, and I'm going to start then by putting down a few foundational colors. I want to get a little contrast between the foreground and the background. So I like the dark gray background, and I think I'm going to roll with that. I'll put a little of the sepia tone into that, but overall I want to keep the overall tone of it a dark gray. And what I did is I mixed a little bit of ultramarine blue into my brown, and that then allowed me to tone down the brown and make it a little more gray in color. And this picture is wanting to slide away, so I'm just going to use this painter's tape and hold it in place. And I'm just going to fill this in overall with a series of cross-directional strokes. I'm going to go up to this cushion here and give a little delineation between that, because I imagine that the cushion is going to be lighter than the background, and that'll give us again some contrast between the two. And there we go. We just work all the way across. We just want to get an even coat. Whoops. So you got a little bit of lint in there. That does happen sometimes with the glazing technique. It does show off dust particles quite a bit, so you have to be cognizant of that, and just make sure you keep your area clean around it, which I notice I didn't quite follow that rule, but no worries, you just wipe it off and you move on. So I want to get a little bit of shadow just down here underneath the fur, because I imagine corresponding to the picture. And let's put up the actual source photo. That would be the full view of it and not the detail shot. Let's go ahead and put down just that. Let's swap these out, or maybe we can move them right here. I love this drafting table. It makes such a nice surface for doing paintings. You can just kind of move your reference photos around. I'm putting a little bit of a shadow right below the dog here to correspond with the shadow we see here. Now obviously this car seat has that contour, you know, with the way it's designed, but the cushion wouldn't necessarily have that indentation. So I want to make sure I'm not duplicating exactly what I see. So I'm not duplicating this exact photo. And obviously I'm going to take out the background so you don't know that the dog is sitting within a car, but rather we want to make it look like the dog is sitting in a portrait studio, which will give it a nicer portrait feel. So as much as possible, I don't like to invent things, but you have to do that a little bit with art, especially with portraits. You want it to look nice for the client and have it transcend a shot of the dog sitting in a car. I think we have too many negative connotations with dogs sitting in cars, you know, especially if they're locked inside on a summer day, which I'm sure this dog wasn't, but you wouldn't want people to get that interpretation when they look at the painting. We want this painting to give any of the viewers that look at it pleasant ideas and pleasant memories, and not have them think about hot dogs sitting in a hot car on a summer day. So, alright, so I have the initial layer here, very, very faint. You probably just barely see it on there, but that sets the stage for the overall tonality of the portrait. And with that done, I'm going to go in, since this is still drying, it'll take a few minutes to completely dry. I'm going to work in on the actual dog and start setting some of the tonalities then of the dog, where we have the light source. And you want to notice where the light source is in your portrait. It's coming from the upper left, and we want to definitely preserve these lighter areas. Those are just so beautiful, that golden tinge of the fur. And then we want to definitely show this darker area below the eye, and that's a focal point there. I'm going to use a smaller brush. I started with a larger flat edge. We're going to move to a round. And I'm going to take this medium that I have on here already from the previous layer. I'm going to add a little more raw umber dark, and then also some burnt sienna, and just mix this right in. It's good to utilize what you have in your palette. Now we don't need it to be super warm in tone because it is a darker value, and a good rule of thumb is if you're working with a darker value, you want to have the color cooler generally. So generally when it's warmer, when you have a lighter value, it's going to be warmer in tone. When I mean warmer, I'm talking about reds and yellows and oranges. And when I'm talking about cooler, I'm talking about blues and greens and violets. So we're going to use a somewhat cooler tone and just start to glaze in then this tonality here. And it's very, very translucent, almost transparent right now. In fact, let me go over this a little bit so I can see the lights reflecting off of it. But yeah, you can see the sketch right through it. I mean, it's very, very translucent at this stage, which is fine. We don't want to make it too opaque right away. Give us a little breathing room to see what we want to do with the picture. And again, with the glazing technique, it does allow you that freedom to paint over and not obliterate the details that you had underneath. Okay, I'm going to get a little more on my brush. And I'm going to work this down. I'm noticing some of these patterns here in the fur, and I want to capture those. Basically going over the values, which to some degree I did sketch those in already. So it's taking a lot of the guesswork out of the painting process because I pre-drew most of the values in during the sketch. I don't always do that with my paintings, but this particular one lended itself to that, especially with the smoother surface of the hardboard. Makes it a lot easier to sketch on than canvas would be. And so I'm just going over and darkening these areas I have in the colored pencil, and you can see how that's building up really nice. These initial stages are pretty slow. I mean, you have to cut yourself some slack and just relax as you paint. You realize it's gonna take a few hours to get this portrait done. In fact, I can spend anywhere from 10 to 20 on a portrait that's very detailed, so I'm not rushing it. I want to do a good job for the client, make them happy with the end result. And so I'm just getting those initial layers here and having fun with it. A little more raw sienna and a little more of the ultramarine blue mix in there. I want to keep the colors pretty simple at this point. Like I say, all we're doing is just going over some of what we did with the sketch, and that'll make it nice. Eventually it's going to get a little more opaque because to some degree we do want to cover over the sketch aspect so that it looks more like a painting and not like just a sketch with a watercolor wash over it. Now I'm going to go over on the nose. I'm just going to use what I have, even though we know the nose is more of a gray color, not brown. I'm just going to use the paint that I have on my brush and the palette, and I'm just wanting to get into value right now. And I can go back in there and neutralize this and make it more gray by using more blue, because the opposite of brown, most browns anyway, is blue, and that will tend to give your paint more of a grayish look to it. Okay, I want to darken it just a bit to get around the eyes. I'm going to add a little more ultramarine blue and the raw umber dark, and we'll mix this together. And we're going to go in there and just work in some of that tonality. Now I have to get pretty close because I don't want to exceed the lines that I drew and mess up that detail. That'll just create more work for me later. And you don't want to work any harder than we have to with painting. Work smarter, not harder. So I'm just working that in, and yeah, that sets it off pretty nicely. So now I have that detail highlighted. So if I do go over with more of a translucent or even translucent to opaque layer, I won't lose that detail because it's so much darker now. And I see a nice dark value right here in the crease, or I don't know if you want to call it crease, but just the separation between the ear and the neck of the dog. So I'm going to go in with this darker value that I used for the eyes, and I'm going to get that in there right now. So I'm locating some of these dark values that tend to be almost the same. I'm going to delineate them right now. In fact, let's see if we can get some of that into the nostril, if the paint has dried enough that I can do that. Okay, yeah, we got a little bit there with the nostril, that's good. Great. And now I want to delineate a little bit under the ear here, just a bit more. go. I use my fingers. If you've watched some other videos I've done, I use my fingers quite a bit to blend the color down. If I put too much pigment down, I just wipe it away with my finger. And of course, acrylic is non-toxic, so it's not going to harm you to get that on your skin, and you just clean up afterwards. No worries. Now, work that up a little bit, and I see a little value darkening needed down here on that side of the dog's leg, and maybe just a hair under here to suggest that we have some shadows going on where this dog is resting on the cushion. Probably will have a little bit of it here in these wrinkles where I'm guessing, you know, the paws denting into that cushion. I just kind of made that up, but I think it'll look just fine when we have it done. The focal point will be the dog, so even if the cushion is not entirely realistic, you know, where I'm saying it looks just like a photograph, that's okay. Because again, the focal